done. Start connecting. Okay. Here. Okay, hello and welcome to the JLU Knowledge Series. This is a flagship event of the university where we invite some global leaders and decision makers. These could be people from the industry, from the academia, and from the public sector as well. But the idea here really is to learn from the best, pick up their life lessons to aid our own professional futures. We had a great run in the first season of this series. We had guests such as Mr. Rajat Mathur of Morgan Stanley. We had Mr. Anil Chopra of Bajaj Capital, among many other guests as well. And all of our episodes from the first season have been a huge success. With that in mind, I'm thrilled to inaugurate the second season of the JLU Knowledge Series. I am Karan Gupta. I'm a final year MBA student here at JLPS. And we have with us today Mr. Abhijit Dutta. Mr. Dutta holds a degree in mechanical engineering from NIT Bhopal. After that, he went on to do his MBA in industrial management from NITI in Mumbai, both of which are, of course, premier institutions. Post his education, he has had an illustrious career. He has worked in companies such as Wipro, IBM, Capgemini, among many others. And at present, he's the managing director of Accenture in India. Accenture, of course, is a Fortune Global 500 company and an IT services and consulting giant. Mr. Dutta is at the helm of affairs and he gets to make consequential decisions for his company, which is why today's session promises to be a great one. So in the session today, we'll learn about Mr. Datta's professional journey and the lessons that he learned. We'll also learn about some current critical business challenges and how companies can become more future ready. So yeah, without any further delay, let me hand this session over to Mr. Dutta and his team. A very warm welcome to you, sir. A very warm welcome to Hanuma ma'am and to Aishwarya ma'am as well. Yeah, you guys can take it over now.
Thank you. Thank you, Karan, for the introduction. And I'm privileged to be here. And this is an opportunity where I get to share the dais with the next generation who is going to come and take our places in the different organizations of the future. And very aptly, that is why we said that we're going to talk about the topic on developing future-ready organizations. But before I do that, let me do a quick introduction of myself. I mean, Karan did a very good job in terms of introducing my professional stints so far. By the way, I am a mechanical engineer. I passed out of NIT Bhopal. Okay, I had nothing to do with IT when I did my engineering. But right after engineering, I thought, let me try my hand on the management side. So right after NIT Bhopal, I went on to study industrial management at NITI. And by the way, that was the first batch of industrial management from NITI as well, because NITI was all along producing a batch of industrial engineers, that those were the MTech population from industrial engineering purpose. And I was the privileged to be part of the first batch of industrial management from NITI. And coincidentally, my roll number was also 1. So for batch 1, roll 1 was my credential when I joined NITI. But when I joined NITI, what I understood is how business really operates. I mean, all along during engineering, I had sketchy ideas of how firms operated. Of course, I always had a dream, being a mechanical engineer, to contribute in the engineering side. So that is a dream that I still continued even when I went into NITI. So my specialization in NITI was operations management. Again, you may ask me, it's an irony that I'm doing a job in IT today. Okay, I'll tell you how all these things came in. But again, the very fact what NITI taught me is about looking at things end to end in a holistic manner. And that is the first lesson we learned. The second lesson we learned is that the best marketing you can do is with your own ability and what you deliver on the ground, because you are your own sales agent. And the why I emphasize that I was part of the first batch was also we were an experimental batch that was coming out of an institute which is known for industrial engineering. And how do we make our positions in the market as management graduates, first of all? And not only management graduates, we were to basically kind of throw a challenge to all other management institutes that had established itself in India by that time. Okay, so what did we do? I mean, happy to again say that as a part of marketing, we conceptualized an event called Prerna in NITI. And I'm sure as a management graduate, many of you know what Prerna is. It is today one of the premier platforms where you showcase your industrial projects to different corporates. And that is the time when we conceptualized that. We traveled across the country, met all the management schools in India and told them, here is NITI who is coming to basically challenge you as a management graduate. Come to this forum and prove your mettle. Prove, for example, I traveled to IIM Calcutta and said, we know you are great, but today NITI is placing a challenge in front of you. So I hope you accept the challenge and come and fight out in terms of what good projects that you do. The reason why we chose good projects, because it is where the rubber hits the road, because what you learn in management and what you practice is what you see in your summer projects or your winter projects or your internships that you do. And that is where we told the corporates, here are the best management graduates coming from all across the country and showcasing how they solved the problem. Okay, and here is a set of your future employees. Come and have a look, because the problem they are solving today can be a problem of tomorrow for your organization. And we could gather in the year 1996 a kitty of 2 lakh rupees as the investment that the corporates made at that point of time, because we told them, here is the kitty that's going to be the seed fund for the future initiatives in the same space, because we're going to reward the best project that was done, and that set the ball rolling. And today this particular event is one of the very prized event for all the management graduates across the country. So that was my lessons in marketing. Where did I want to be a marketing guy? No, but we understood the reason why you want to stay afloat, and not only stay afloat, create a name for your own self. Okay, if we have been able to do that, we consider ourselves as successful marketing guys that basically learned on the job while at campus. So in NITI, because I told you that I still carried a dream of working for an engineering company, but I did not join an IT company from the campus, by the way. I joined an automobile company. I'm sure you all know Eicher Group. I joined Eicher Group in Indore. Okay, and as luck would have it, I was basically chosen because of my pedigree from NITI and all those things as a part of the core team who had to implement an ERP. And I'm talking of year 1996. That was the time when most of the companies were implementing ERP for the first time. And this gave me an opportunity to learn again the most of the business processes that an organization does as a part of an we call it the core business processes. So I learned how to kind of create a process right from identifying a supplier to that of creating a contract, creating in supplies, making good receipt note, receiving it in the stores, issuing it for production, and carrying out the production, doing the quality checks, doing the pre-sales checks, and then selling it as well. So that was the learning I had. And again, it goes back to, again, my passion, because I was always a sucker for learning how things work. Okay. When I was a kid and maybe even as a toddler, I would even say go to the extent of breaking all the toys that I had just to understand how does a toy work. Okay, and then I would try to put those toys back together. But being a kid at that point of time, I may not have been very successful in terms of putting the toys back together, but it gave me an idea of, and it kind of instilled a curiosity of learning how things work. And I think that is something that I will probably attribute to what I am today, because I'm still curious about learning how things work. And that is exactly why we go out to all the clients that we serve even today with a mind that first let me understand you end to end, then only I'll make my recommendation in terms of what I can do for you. Okay, and that is something that I wanted to share with every one of you, because you all are at that cusp of that crossroad in your own careers as well. And I have brought a simple, easy to understand slideware pack as well. I hope I'll be able to drive home very minimalistically in the idea of how to create organizations of the future. Okay, and those are lessons we have learned based on our experience. These are lessons that we have learned based on how we transformed other companies based on what we learned on the job. Okay, so that was how I started. As I said, I started my IT, rather face off with IT when we started implementing an ERP. But by the way, I worked for companies like Aisher, Marico, and then I switched to the consulting side. That's when I joined an IT company like Wipro, and then I went on to IBM, and then Capgemini, and then today with Accenture. But let me tell you this, even though I'm working in an IT company, I have never done a single line of code, because I'm not a techie, but I know how technology works. And I know business, I know how business works. My job is to kind of build the bridge between business and technology. And because I understand that from an end-to-end perspective, I'm able to map what the business requires to what the IT would be required to enable that business. And we are in the business of enabling other businesses so that they are successful. And IT, as I see, is only an enabler. Okay, so I'll pause here if you have any questions. Let's make it more interactive. And I don't want it to be a monologue. I want it to be a dialogue. So feel free to ask any questions if you may.
I would love to know a little bit more, could you elaborate a little bit more on that transition, where you started in a tech firm, you started in an automobile company, post your MBA, from there to becoming an IT consultant, that transition, how did that whole thing happen? Could you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Sure. So when I passed out of my NITI campus, I was offered a job with Aisha from the campus, and the job role was of a material management executive. Okay, I joined in as an assistant manager materials. My job was of purchasing. I would spend my day basically procuring materials for production. In that journey, I learned about procurement. And while I did that, I was also given an additional responsibility to manage management information system for procurement. Say, for example, how is the inventory moving? How much of purchase I'm doing? What are the high cost goods that I'm doing? How can I reduce my costs so that ultimately I can save on the product cost, which would improve my margin in and hence improve the profitability of the company. So I was given a charge to also manage the IT system related to procurement. And that is how I learned how IT and business kind of works together. So then, as I said, I always had a thing for knowing how things work. So I said, why should I be kind of restricted to only procurement? Let me pick up other area. How does a sales process work? How does a quality management process work? How does a manufacturing management process work? How does a financial management process work? So all these things ultimately built up, and then I was able to relate back to what I studied way back in my B school. Okay, so all those things that I studied came to life when I started touching those processes and those systems. And therefore I was a natural choice to be the lead of a process when it comes to implementing an ERP. Okay, so when you implement an IT system, you always build an IT system for the business. And that is where I stepped in into an IT project, but representing business. And that was how slowly the transformation started. So once I worked with Aisha, I said, fine, I learned a lot about automobile company. Let me kind of enrich my learning and see another case in itself. So I joined Marico. Marico is a FMCG client, and all of you all know Marico, right? Parachute, Saffola, these are all the brands from Marico. So I joined there and started working on not only their ERP implementation, but then I started doing advanced applications like supply chain optimization, business warehousing. Okay, then I understood how the transactions in business ultimately gives rise to data, and all this data is used to get more insights, and whereby these insights become a perfect and a powerful tool for running the business. And that is where I started honing my skills in terms of looking at it at a more holistic manner than what I started off. And that's when I said, let me switch to the other side of the fence on the consulting side. And again, it's not because consulting career is great. It's again, the drive that I had is about getting more and more exposure. Let me learn more. And I don't know how many of you are fans of classical English music. I'm a great fan of UB40, and I can recall one song which says, every day I'm learning more. The more I learn, the less I know than before. So it's a song called Higher Grounds. If you haven't heard it, definitely hear that. But that is a principle that I've seen work very well for me. The hunger for knowing more has probably brought me where I am today. So after I switched over to consulting, it has been a constant kind of a add-on to the exposure, because while in consulting, the best thing that you get is an exposure where you work with one client for X number of months, then with another project, you start working with another client. So the knowledge, the learning kinds of build on more and more. And today we have what we call the best repository of knowledge that we have been built because of the experience we all have brought into the table. And that is what we use, because yesterday's learning is a pedestal for the future. And that kind of brings me to the fact that the topic that I've brought for you is about creating in organizations of the future. And that's how I'll show you how do we kind of using our history, using our learning, using our experience, extrapolate that learning and insight to predict if it was possible of what is going to be the future. So Karan, did I answer your question?
Yes, you more than answered you more than answered my question. It was a particularly interesting one because I think your previous experience in the engineering firms actually gives you an advantage over other IT consultants who just enter the field with no other experience. Because you've been on the other side of the fence, that actually gives you an advantage in the IT consulting business because you can really connect it on a deep level. You can really connect the technology to the ground level business reality because of your experience. So that's a very interesting one.
So in our business, we look at it in two aspects. We call it the domain knowledge, then we call the IT knowledge. Okay. Ultimately, the kind of guys you just mentioned are people who would come from an engineering college and start their career by, say, creating codes. Okay. Based on some requirements somebody would have given them, they will create that logic of that code and create those codes. But where does that logic come from? The logic comes from people who know the business. That's how the requirement comes in. Okay, that's how you spell out the requirements. And then the guys who are the IT guys would create a code, enable that requirement so that the business can achieve their objective through that requirement. So yeah. All right. So Karan, let me also spend some time in terms of what it means for a student from different streams to kind of come to an organization. I'm sure every one of you who have joined here from different streams of Jagran Lake City University would ultimately step into a career in an organization. The question is, how do I fit in? How do I contribute? And how am I a part of that journey that is going into the future? So that's something that I will kind of clarify when I pull out my slideware pack and show it to you. So let me know when you are ready to kind of engage into that journey.
So I think we can begin now.
So thanks, Karan. That brings me to our topic of today, that is developing organizations which are future ready. And I will ask my colleagues from Accenture who has joined with me to bring up the presentation. So Aishwarya is a part of my team. Hanuma is also part of my team. They have joined me over here and they will also help me kind of go through this. All right. So are we ready to rock?
Yes.
So this is the agenda that I had for you. Okay. Let's look at the very first part is that why do we even need to look at the crystal ball, which kind of gives you an idea of the future. Okay. I'll try and make it more interesting. I have some good videos to share as well. So hopefully you will enjoy. And by the way, pause me anywhere where you have questions. I'll be eager to answer those questions then and there. Okay. So as you can see here, Hanuma and Aishwarya is going to help me here. And I'm going to go through the entire story for you. And hopefully the story is an entertaining one. Okay, so let's start with the first section. So this is where we say, why do you even want to look at the crystal ball? Okay. So what you see on my screen is nothing but what is happening across the world today. And the words that you see out there are simple facts that you see. So the entire economy is changing today. What used to be the yesterday's scenario isn't the scenario today. And today we are calling it as the new normal, the new reset, whatever you call that. So this pandemic has taught us many things. And one of the things is to look at the future in a different light. So there is weak demand of products and services in the economy. Every day, the pandemic itself is taking up new shape. Today, you have Omicron. Tomorrow, you have another variant. How do you kind of stand tall in this scenario? Then there is a growing gap between economies, the developed and the developing economies. The gap is growing. Even within our country, the divide between the rich and the poor are growing. Then there is, because of a downstream effect of weak demand and its effect on production and services, there is growth in terms of unemployment. And all of us are here looking at what's going to be the employment scenario tomorrow, because all of you are going to step into a new career tomorrow. Does that career mean in something that you had a picture in your mind, or is it going to be something different? So things are changing every day. There's inflation growing, there is geopolitical unrest going, and finally, because of all these things happening, there is a big war for talent. In our industry, we call this current era as the great resignation era. And we are seeing a lot of churn in our industry as well. Why so? Because things are so much in a flux and people are taking a hard stance into what they felt was okay yesterday may not be okay today, and therefore they want to try out something new. And as a result of which, you are seeing more and more new things coming every day. And that is the reason why I said the need for the looking at the crystal ball, which is something that we want to showcase for trying to understand what does the future hold for us. Okay, and every organization would have a need to look at that, because unless they do this, every organization will fade into history. We'll see some interesting cases as well for organizations who were not able to predict the future rightly. Okay, but before we do that, let's kind of look at a quick video. And I have brought some good YouTube videos that you should be able to enjoy. Okay, so let's look at this video.
By 2050, our planet will be a vastly different place. By 2050, artificial intelligence will be everywhere. AI-driven stores will allow you to purchase goods without cashiers or waiting lines. AI will diagnose and treat patients, manage transportation, and analyze massive quantities of data. AI chatbots and voice recognition systems will sound like and behave just like real people. AI will be implemented into robots. By 2050, robot dogs and other pets will serve as companions. Robots will dominate factories and begin to serve as teachers, cooks, pharmacists, law enforcement officers, athletes, and other professionals. In 2050, universal translators will remove all language barriers and voice recognition will be ubiquitous. Hundreds of sensors will be installed in our clothes, homes, and overall environment to monitor our well-being and improve our lives. Computing will change. By 2050, we may run on quantum computers. Based on the properties of quantum physics, quantum computers could deliver massive leaps in computing power, outstripping any current transistor-based models. AI and computers will integrate into humans. Brain chips like Elon Musk's Neuralink will treat neurological disorders like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, spinal cord injury, and blindness. These brain chips will allow people to control computers and prosthetics with no physical interaction. By 2050, we may be controlling things with our minds and communicating through brain signals. By 2050, robotic prosthetics may be stronger and more advanced than our own biological ones. Prosthetic eyes and ears will enter the market, curing blindness and deafness. And in 30 years, like AI, virtual reality will be everywhere. People will try on clothes in virtual reality closets, and holograms will bring FaceTime to a new level. VR platforms will allow you to move around while staying still. We will be able to travel the world and experience life on other planets, all from home. In 2014, 320,000 new electric vehicles were registered around the world. In 2019, that number was 2.3 million. By 2025, global EV sales are projected to surpass 10 million. And by 2050, the majority of automobiles will be electric. Gas stations will disappear and be replaced with at-home charging stations, refueling vehicles in as low as 10 minutes. Automobiles will become driverless. As of now, Tesla vehicles already have autopilot features that achieve level 2 automation on the Society of Automotive Engineers Vehicle Automation Ranking. Other companies, such as Google, have invested billions of dollars into self-driving technology. Currently, it's expected that fully autonomous level 5 vehicles will roll out to consumers in the late to mid-2020s and become commonplace in the 2030s. By 2050, people will be hopping into cars with no steering wheel. Thousands of autonomous vans and semi-trucks will travel across country, delivering packages and shipments with no human interaction. Drones will do the same for shorter distances. By 2050, swarms of drones will be delivering small packages from floating or vertical warehouses. There will also be surveillance and security drones, along with drones for construction, entertainment, and agriculture. eVTOLs, or electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, will provide urban transportation. Currently, there are several working eVTOL aircraft prototypes. The urban market for them is massive, and studies have revealed that the technology could become highly profitable. One of the companies working on eVTOLs is Uber, who wants to make aerial ride-sharing a reality. There's also Airbus, who have their drone-like Airbus pop-up concept. If Uber, Airbus, and other companies succeed, we could see widespread adoption of the technology. By 2050, cities will likely have air taxis everywhere. But that may not work. Elon Musk says that roads must go 3D, which means either flying cars or tunnels. He believes the answer is tunnels. Right now, Elon Musk's Boring Company is digging small, experimental tunnels under cities. If Musk can significantly cut down boring costs, by 2050, cities will have thousands of tunnels underneath them. Another one of Musk's brainchilds, Hyperloop, will revolutionize long-distance land transportation. Hyperloop, the idea for vacuum maglev high-speed trains, could speed up to 700 miles per hour. A trip from Los Angeles to San Francisco would be only 43 minutes long, compared to a 6-hour car ride. By 2050, Hyperloop systems will certainly be constructed, and replacing airplanes may evolve into the most popular type of long-distance domestic travel. But for travel between continents, airplanes will remain dominant. With improved batteries, we could see electric airliners take to the skies. In addition, several companies are working to bring back supersonic aircraft. These aircraft are certainly not airliners, but small-scale jets meant to carry only 10 to 100 people. By 2050, we could have Concorde-like, but safer, supersonic aircraft soaring through the skies. Or, as an alternative to airplanes, what if we traveled around in rockets? Well, Elon Musk wants to use his Starship to transport people all around the world soon. In Musk's Starship, one could travel from New York to London in only 29 minutes. Our energy system is transforming. Over the past decade, the cost of solar power has plummeted. Due to economies of scale and improved technology, the price of solar equipment has dropped by 89% since 2010. The cost for wind power has plunged as well. Due to these decreases, new solar and wind investments are usually cheaper than natural gas and coal investments. However, renewables still have one major setback: energy storage. For utility-scale systems, renewables need a way to store excess energy from windy and sunny days for cloudy and calm days. To help with this, researchers are developing new methods to store large amounts of energy. Some examples include storing energy as heat in materials, compressing air, or turning air into a liquid. Although it remains to be seen which method is best, these solutions will certainly be implemented for large-scale utility in the future. By 2050, renewables are expected to provide nearly half of all world electricity. But that's not all. As solar and wind begin to dominate the energy sector, fusion power will rise. Currently, fusion power is purely speculative. However, 35 nations are collaborating on ITER, a $20 billion project in France to test the feasibility of fusion for power generation. ITER will work by creating a fusion-powered plasma inside an experimental machine. The walls of the machine will absorb the energy, using it to produce steam that will generate electricity with turbines. ITER's first plasma is planned for December 2025. By 2050, we could have fully functional fusion power plants, operating more efficiently than any other power source in history. With NASA's Artemis program, it's planning to land humans back on the moon by 2024. SpaceX, Dynetics, and Blue Origin are all working on landers for the project. After the moon, NASA wants to send humans to Mars sometime in the 2030s. SpaceX is even more ambitious. They are developing the Starship, a rocket that they hope will send humans to Mars by 2024. Once they get there, SpaceX plans to establish a permanent colony. By 2050, Elon Musk plans to have a Martian city with as many as 1 million people. SpaceX is also developing Starlink, thousands of satellites that will provide the world's most advanced broadband internet system. Other space companies such as Blue Origin, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Virgin Galactic are all racing for space as well. In 30 years, we might have a permanent colony on the moon, space hotels in orbit, and humans on Mars. By 2050, our food consumption will be wildly different, mostly due to meat. Livestock contributes to 15% of human greenhouse gas emissions and uses 26% of the Earth's terrestrial surface. To feed our growing population while lowering emissions, we must move away from meat. Assisting with this are meat alternatives. Companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods have obtained billion-dollar valuations, supplying the rapidly growing meat alternatives market. In addition, plant-based diets as a whole are growing in popularity. Then there's cultured meat. Cultured meat is meat produced by in vitro cell culture. It avoids the slaughtering of animals and produces very minimal emissions. By 2050, we will likely have in vitro T-bone steaks produced for the masses. To meet the demand for increased plants and the growing population while escaping the uncertainty of the changing climate, farms will move indoors, vertical, and into cities. The vertical farming market is exploding. By 2050, there will be large-scale vertical farms all around the world, feeding the growing population while using very little land and water. As our food consumption transforms, biotechnology will advance. While prosthetics replace large organs, stem cells will regenerate injuries and diseases. Stem cells, which can be guided into becoming a wide variety of specific cells, will be used for therapies. Eventually, like brain chips, stem cell therapies could help those with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, but also those with type 1 diabetes, heart disease, burns, cancer, arthritis, and all sorts of other diseases. Another biotechnology is gene editing. Using CRISPR/Cas9 technology, scientists can now remove strands of DNA that are causing illnesses and replace them with different ones. In the future, scientists hope to cure lifelong inherited diseases with this technology. While we decarbonize the world's economy, we will utilize carbon removal technology. Carbon capture and storage will catch carbon emissions from a source and then transport them underground, leaving the atmosphere unaffected. Advanced technologies will remove carbon directly from the air and seawater. Additionally, some minerals naturally react with carbon dioxide, and we can use them to convert carbon from gas into a solid. It's not sure which of these strategies is best, but in the future, we will certainly see their widespread implementation. If you enjoyed this video, it would be amazing if you like and subscribe. Also, remember to check out the comments and join the conversation.
All right. So back to where we started. Does that give you an idea of what the future holds for us? And I'm sure all of you at JLU who are going to graduate in the coming years, for you, by the time you progress through your career, you will see these almost realized. Even if 50% of what we showed here becomes a reality, you should be able to kind of see this in life. This is what we summarized here. You had seen 6 key forecasts for the future. Okay. Obviously, some will happen at its own pace, some will happen fast, but question is, what does it ultimately mean for you, me, and the larger part of business? And I'm sure you have already an idea of what it is going to come next. The question that what does future mean for business? Okay, so next we go on to the next section. First, let me ask you, why does even business exist? The key answer can come from many different words, but one word definitely will stand out is success. Ultimately, we conduct business to be successful in what we do. If we are not successful, obviously we will not exist. And that is a question of survival. So it becomes an imperative for business to take a judgmental call in terms of where they want to be in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, depending upon the time horizon you're talking about. And that is where we want to look at. So here you see on the screen is an example of multiple business. They were great business. I mean, none of the logos that you see out here, you would not recall. But have they survived the test of time? The answer is probably yes, no, maybe. But take the example of Nokia. Nokia brought in the first revolution of mobile phone. And if anybody talked about a quality mobile phone, it had to be Nokia. The entire concept about photocopying had come from Xerox, and Xerox became a verb in itself. I want to Xerox a paper. That brand created a verb called Xerox. Okay, and where are they today? Because things have changed so fast. The technology revolution has taken its pace in such a speed, they have not been able to run at their breakneck speed. They fell behind. Some of these companies are trying to survive today. Okay, we know very example of IBM. In the past, if there had to be any IT business, and if it did not run on IBM servers, it meant an suboptimal business. So IBM, great story. But again, it's a question of, did they see the future right and made the right choices? The answer is quite debatable. Okay, with that, I'll move on to the next slide. So Aishwarya, can you please go on to the next slide? So this is something somebody has said, okay. You can't really predict the future, but you can get a preview. What it essentially means is that whenever you try to predict the future, you may get certain signals, okay. Some of these signals could be noise. Some of these could be really something that we are talking about what we need to do. It's our calling that is important out here in terms of what signal do we catch, use, and act upon it. Okay, so this is what it says. So you can have the best of the breed technology to kind of predict your future, but if you don't get the right insight and make the right decision, obviously you're not going to be effective in terms of your decision that you have made, right? So I will pause here and spend a little time kind of absorbing what Peter Drucker had to say. Peter Drucker, as you know, is the father of competitive advantage. Okay, I'm sure all of you will read Peter Drucker if you are a management school graduate. The theory of competitive advantage comes from Peter Drucker. But what he said is really true, because the best way to predict the future is to create it. What you saw in that video is a quite evident that some people are trying to create the future as well, because they had a dream. They could think that the future holds something great, a very different thing, and they acted upon it. They're acting upon it, and they expect success to come their way in the future. And that's the simple thought why organizations need to first itself try and predict the future, but also build and create the future for themselves. Okay, we'll talk about it in a little more details in the coming few slides, but let's move on. Any questions so far?
So I have a couple of them. So when the video was playing on about the future of technology and about how life would look like in 2050, and when that segment about space travel came, you had a smile on your face. I could see that. So would it be fair to say that you are a big space enthusiast? Something
Yes,
that's
I
very
am. I have grown up with the likes of Star Trek, which says go beyond what you can and beyond where man has ever been before. And I think that's a reality. So when we are talking of space, it basically means an immense opportunity for us. We don't even know what exists beyond our galactic solar system. And maybe there is more intelligent and human beings out there, if they are called human beings at all, we don't know. But where science ends, philosophy begins, and with philosophy you have an open space for imagination, creativity, science, and our doings. So I see that as an opportunity, definitely. So space is the final frontier which humankind will conquer at some point of time.
Yes, sir.
So question is, if business is anticipating disruptive changes in the future, how do they kind of manage change? Okay, and that brings us to the next section, or again, a very short video. I don't know want to spend so much time on the length of the video that you had seen in the past, but this is a very short one. It's about a 1.5 minute, but let's look at it.
As business owners, I believe there are two things we must do. One, work through the various scenarios and their implications on our financials. What if the pandemic were to last 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? In specific terms, how else might our business be impacted? What's likely to happen to our products, customers, markets? For each of the scenarios, ask what critical factors could cause it to happen. What are the factors that are within our control to improve the scenario? Can we trim costs further? What else can we do differently? 2, closely examine our modus operandi, the business model, in the light of the change internal and external environment. For example, training companies are delivering their offerings via the internet. Doctors are seeing their patients leveraging on video technology. I just read that in the US, car dealers are making house calls. One last thing. Look at our internal processes and systems and structures to prepare for the upturn. Above all, stay positive, keep the morale high. This too will pass. This is Andrew Sen, Decision Processes International Asia. Stay safe.
All right. So very interesting thing what he said. He said, look at your process, structure, and all these things and think whether it will survive the test of time. And these are things that you need to look at when you see the future. And we say in our day-to-day saying, save for the future, build your house as if it is going to stand the toughest of the storm. And that's what business also has to do when it has to kind of move with the times. And that is the reason why we have the need to see the future and then internalize what it means for us and what do we need to do in order to survive in the future and succeed in the future. With that, let's move on. Aishwarya, can we please move on? So this is where we want to really look at a particular industry. Okay. And this industry is consumer goods industry. And I'm going to ask my colleague, Hanuma, to step in and explain to us that what are the changes that she is seeing in the consumer goods industry. So she leads consumer goods industry for me. And this is what she sees, how the industry is changing as well. Over to you, Hanuma.
Thanks, Abhijit, and thanks, JLU, for this opportunity for me to speak on this. But yeah, so we have seen like how the overall industry has changed and what we need to look in. But if you come to the consumer goods industry, if we just go 2 years back, almost around the same time, right? 2020, and then same March time, suddenly, there is this lockdown that has been declared, like slowly one after the other country, and everything came to stand still, right? And then when you go to when you want to have a products in your house or for your consumption, you don't know how you have to get it. Or even if you go to a retail store on a specific time, then there are no products available on the shelf. That means like everything came to a kind of a standstill for a certain point in time. And then slowly things started picking up, right? But how is it happening? So what the previous video said, it too shall pass. But is it going to remain the same, or how is it going to change? That's what we are going to see. Aishwarya, can you go to next slide? So basically, what we have seen as an industry in last 2 years, specifically from the consumer goods industry, it's not going to go back to the same state where we are in, because the way things are changing, and it's like a permanent reset that has happened. There are for many industries that has happened, but for consumer goods industry, we have seen like that it's never going to go back to the same state where it is in. And the way the brands and other things are emerging are going beyond the brands to more human centric. So what's happening, what are the 3 business trends that we have to watch post pandemic? So we'll just have a quick glance of this video, how things are changing, and then we will summarize this, how the overall industry is changing.
In the post-pandemic world, consumer behavior and business practices will be different in significant ways from their pre-pandemic patterns. The pandemic may best be analyzed as an accelerant of changes that were already underway. Online shopping has now eclipsed brick-and-mortar storefronts, which were already in decline before the pandemic. Moreover, the trend toward convenience and delivery is now entrenched. The pandemic's push for work from home was a major acceleration of trends toward more flexible work hours. Companies will expand flexible work hours, saving money on real estate and reducing business travel. In the post-pandemic world, technology is the new leverage that allows certain businesses to scale their services in an impressive manner. The stock market has already rewarded companies with the ability to harness technology to reduce costs while expanding services. The pandemic was merely the tipping point to accelerate trends that have been building for decades.
Okay, so what primarily this is talking about is the change is happening in 3 facets. Okay, so Aishwarya, if you go to the next slide. So maybe so it's happening in 3 facets. One is the consumer side, the way the consumers are behaving. So when we are saying consumers are behaving, primarily it is 3 ways: the way they wanted to buy, the kind of products that they wanted to buy, and the kind of products that have to be delivered. So all these 3 things are changing. One is like the type of products they want to buy, more health consciousness and the fitness consciousness. That's what is happening. And how they wanted to buy, the medium is changing. You might go to a retail store, it may be a click and collect, where you order online and pick it up at store, or home delivery, and then maybe like a lockers and all that are getting installed so that you can go pick your goods from there. And then how they are using the products at home also, because the work from home has come into play. How they want to work and party it. Again, things are going online. For example, like a Shopify app that has come in, where you can actually call your friends when you are shopping, show the trends, and then buy. So that kind of thing is happening, and also very personalized products that are coming in. The second thing, if you see, the external business environment is changing, right? So the brands are, it's not just brands pushing their products, but they have to be purpose-led. Why they are selling that brand? Why a consumer has to buy that brand? Because consumers are looking sustainability as well, like whether the product is sustainable, green labeled, or where it is coming from, the origin. For example, farm to table is coming up with locally sourced product and say that this is where it is sourced from. So that's from that. And the other thing is, there are government regulations and all coming more in terms of how the business can be conducted, how the product related information that has to be published. All those things are happening. And then the sustainability related regulations are also coming in terms of how they can do. And then coming to the internal business environment, the third aspect, this is all from the technology, right? So all the technology is transforming. So how a business can leverage the technology, right? So now the consumer goods companies are coming up with e-commerce, opening their websites and all, and then they are directly reaching to the consumer, or they are building the agile supply chain, so that the shifts in trends, like for some products the demand has increased very much and some products demand has reduced. So how you are capturing those trends and how you are adopting to that. So these are like very high level. We can talk any much that if you go in depth into each of these, but this is just a glimpse of how the things are changing for consumer goods industry. So if you go to the next slide, basically what we are talking, okay, your industry is changing, the environment is changing, but still businesses are failing. Why that is happening? So they are receiving the signals, they are seeing the changes. So this is where we will see like why adoption is very much important. So we'll just see this small video, why the businesses are failing after knowing things.
What we're seeing in the last 10 years, certainly, are large companies failing. Companies like Kodak, companies like Blockbuster, companies like Sears. And if you step back and think about it, it's not obvious why that should be. And when you ask people why that's so, they typically say, well, they're being disrupted. But disrupted by what? Disruption really means the emergence of a new set of competitors, a different way of doing business, a different technology that allows you to do business in different ways. But the interesting thing is that the pace of change, the pace of disruption, is actually increasing. And in the face of that disruption, those changes, what we're seeing are big companies failing. There are three very separate disciplines that they have to be good at if they're going to be successful at dealing with disruption. They have to have a process, a discipline for developing new ideas, what we call ideation. They have to figure out which of those ideas are likely to be successful as a business, what we refer to as incubation. And then the third discipline is that they have to, once they have an idea that looks like it could be successful, they have to have a set of processes that ensure that that new business gets the assets and capabilities they need to grow. And here's the problem. Some companies are pretty good at incubation. They're perfectly willing to spend money to come up with new ideas. The problem comes when these businesses begin to scale and it takes serious resources. When that happens, suddenly these senior executives who are all in favor of innovation suddenly realize that to develop new businesses, they may in fact have to sacrifice some short-term profits. That's when many CEOs suddenly step back and say, maybe not. Let's focus just for a second on Amazon. Amazon was founded in 1994. In 25 years, they have gone from zero revenues to $230 billion with more than 600,000 employees. They compete in businesses as diverse as online shopping, but they also produce television shows. They have Amazon Web Services, which is the largest cloud provider in the US. They are in a variety of different businesses. How have they done that? They've done it by having very careful processes for ideation, incubation, and scaling. They have a process which they call the FAQ process. This is a process that encourages people throughout the organization to come up with ideas for new businesses. If the idea is deemed to have potential, then they immediately move into an incubation phase. They form small teams. These teams are responsible for coming up with a minimal viable product to put in front of a customer. If that idea turns out to look potentially successful, they immediately move into a scaling mode where they provide resources for it, they escalate it, they get senior management attention. One of the things Bezos says is that most companies don't really do experiments. They don't take the big risks. What Bezos says, if you place big bets, just a couple of those big bets succeeding will pay for all the small failures. The nice thing about companies like Amazon and Walmart and some of these other companies is that they do these things in very rapid pace. That is, they don't take forever to decide whether a new idea is potentially valuable or not. The problem is that in big exploit organizations, the processes are typically very measured, very slow, and that oftentimes can kill innovation. So when you do these things, you need to do these processes rapidly. This is really a leadership issue. When we look at companies that have failed, have been disrupted, it's not because of technology. They failed because they didn't have leaders who could play multiple games simultaneously. Almost all companies today are really interested in innovation. But the thing that they often are not sophisticated enough at is making this distinction that we've been talking about between ideation, incubation, and scaling. The best of these companies have managers who understand that it takes all three of these disciplines.
Yeah. So just to very quickly summarize the three processes, what they talked: ideation, incubation, and scaling up. And you have the correct leadership and the speed of innovation, where you have to decide where to take it forward and where to stop. I think these are the key factors for any business to be successful, change with the changing trends and moving forward and be successful in the industry. So with this, I will hand it over back to Abhijit to take it forward with other aspects
Thank you,
on
Hanuman.
this.
I think that was a great example from the industry, and also an important discussion around, ultimately, in spite of doing everything right, why does still business fail? And it all comes down to human beings who are the helm of this, ultimately are the drivers of the change. So leadership does matter. If you have a strong leadership who sees the future, takes risk, and is willing to place their bets on things they are convinced about, I think there is no reason why an organization will not be successful. With that, we'll move on to the next part of the presentation, which is nothing but what does the future mean for me? When I say me, it means all of you all who are here listening to all of us here. So with that, let's move on to where it answers the question in your mind. And I'll start with a Dilbert question, because I asked you at the very start of this session, you're going to ask, how do I fit in? Because it looks all up in the air, very, very science fiction types, maybe even coming closer to astrology or so. How do I, as an individual who's graduating out of this JLU university, kind of fit in? And see here, the humor is that everybody has a place in the story. Of course, in this case, Dilbert's boss did not even know if that a strategy existed, but that's a humor. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. So the future ready organization will anyway have to look at 5 different lenses, as we call it. First is about strategy. That means you have to have a strategy that recognizes what you want to do in the future. Okay, and we heard about talking about innovation, incubation, scaling, etc. That means first you have to strategize, and obviously that's the work of the leadership team to strategize. The next thing that you would talk about is setting the organization structure right in order to make that strategy work. So you can do a fantastic, say, Booz Allen or a big firm giving you the strategy for the future. But if you do not set your organization in the right manner, you will never be able to execute that strategy. That means getting away from a hierarchical organization to that of a task-based structure where you work on small agile team who kind of starts with that idea, incubates that idea, grows that idea, demonstrates that idea, picks the low-hanging fruit, and with the benefit of the low-hanging fruit, it kind of self-funds the next cycle of that innovation. Okay, and this is what we are talking about when it comes to the organization. Then we are talking of the talent. Okay, obviously you may have a fantastic strategy, you may have a fantastic organization structure, but if you do not have the right skill sets of people who can execute this, obviously everything is going to fall apart. So talent is definitely important, and looking at the future, an organization has to see what kind of talent will be required for the future. And that's why your role comes in. Are you readying yourself from a talent perspective for the future? What an organization would need, so that when you are ready for your starting your career with an organization, does the organization see you bringing in valuable talent? And that talent is not necessarily the degree certificate that you carry. It's about ability to think, ability to innovate, ability to work in cross-functional teams, and look at projects which will yield results much faster. Okay, that means we are talking about a kind of agile ways of working. And obviously, as you heard, technology enables everything. You bring in the best breed of technology, but if you're not able to adopt that technology to that of the strategy and the organization and the set of people you have, technology is also going to be a failure. And there is one reason why many companies go for re-implementation of technology in cyclical time, because they probably did not get it right the first time, or they implemented technology in such a way that it was not well adopted. So when you think of technology, you have to think it from the how it kind of embeds into the other cornerstones of your organization, like strategy, people, organization structure. And finally, last thing that you need to look at is about sustainability, because it is an important thing for the future. Because if you're going to survive on this mother planet for our next generations, we need to start acting sustainably. So sustainability becomes a core part of the strategy today, if from an organization perspective. Now let's look at how a typical organization is implementing all of these and kind of making it happen. So let's go to the video which kind of shows that.
Just give me a moment.
So here is a video that you're going to see. It's about a fictitious grocery company. Okay, and if you want to see it in the perspective of a manager who manages that company, okay, what he or she does in her life to make all the 5 things that I talked about happen on the ground. Do we have that, Aishwarya?
Yeah, I'm just sharing. I'll play the video.
Meet the future workforce. 6 months in the life of Jane, CHRO at a global grocery chain. Let's meet Jane. Jane is CHRO for GoGrow, a global grocer. She's been in this position for 10 years and has had a front row seat to the company's international expansion and meteoric growth. One of the things that makes Jane good at her job is her willingness to introduce new practices and technologies that improve employee productivity and job satisfaction. She is especially interested in creating better experiences for GoGrow's 60,000 store employees. Maybe that's because she used to be one of them. During her high school and college days, Jane worked as a bagger and checkout clerk at GoGrow's first store in Berkeley, California. She had no way of knowing that within 35 years, the mom and pop shop would be the world's largest organic grocery store chain, and that she would be one of its leaders. Sustaining the customer experience. GoGrow's leadership team has just rolled out a new strategy for growing the brand. Effective immediately, Jane and her C-suite colleagues need to begin using automation, artificial intelligence, and analytics to deliver better customer experiences. Jane hosts a virtual meeting with a select team of data scientists, HR managers, store managers, and employees from around the world to determine the potential role of bots in the sales process. Together, they dive into advanced workforce analytics to identify tasks and processes that robots and artificial intelligence can automate or augment. Jane realizes that new technologies will fundamentally change how 60,000 store workers will do their jobs. Reimagining retail work. To create better customer experience and better employee experience, Jane and her talent leadership team developed 3 guiding principles. First of all, mundane tasks for store workers will be eliminated. Robots can stock shelves, artificial intelligence can dynamically update prices, and eliminate the need for a checkout payment process entirely. Secondly, new forms of engagement will be developed. Advanced analytics provide insights into what shoppers are looking for on a given day and how customers want to engage. Employees will deliver new experiences thanks to these analyses and new technologies. And last but not least, new in-store roles will be created to deliver unmatched customer experience. One-on-one personal shoppers, meal prep consultants, and ambassadors for GoGrow branded products. Reimagining training and recruitment. GoGrow's new customer experience strategy calls for a new talent strategy and an adaptive workforce trained to deliver exceptional one-to-one customer experience. The new workforce will comprise internal resources who need to be upskilled and external resources who need to be recruited, onboarded, and trained. Jane meets with her recruitment lead to learn how GoGrow plans to tap adaptive talent pools. Artificial intelligence-enabled analytics help identify skills the new customer experience strategy demands. Internal systems and social media networks are used to identify new talent. Jane reviews a new curriculum that covers mandatory training in areas such as health and safety, but also educates store personnel on new roles and new technologies. She is pleased to see the training is immersive, with augmented reality playing a starring role. Reskilling the management team. Upskilling store personnel is one thing. Upskilling GoGrow store managers is another. In parallel, HR team focuses on managers to make sure that they are empowered to embrace the change. They will need to understand the new sales strategy, the new roles of associates, the new technologies that will revolutionize customer experience, the new systems that manage and measure employee performance, and how to use the volumes of customer data that store technologies will make available. Jane directs her trainers to develop a manager training plan that addresses these requirements. Virtual rooms and other immersive technologies are tapped to bring store managers up to speed quickly. Personalizing, extending, and optimizing customer experience. Jane is invited to meet with GoGrow's IT and sales leadership teams to brainstorm new solutions that will bring the vision of hyper-relevant customer experience to life. They opt to move forward with 3 ideas. Firstly, artificial intelligence-embedded smart glasses that present detailed information about customers when they enter the store. Secondly, new technology solutions that allow virtual advisors to be accessible to customers via their phones, homes, or kiosks. Lastly, big data analytics that bring greater precision to merchandising, inventory management, and delivery. Jane sends a message to her team to update training modules accordingly. Making customer experience irresistible. Jane sits on a meeting with GoGrow's marketing and IT teams as they develop a strategy for attracting customers to the new experiences. Several solutions are considered and approved. Predictive analytics will pinpoint when to extend targeted offers and through which channel. IoT tracking will be used to offer deals to customers near a store. Social media listening will enable GoGrow to present offers in advance of life events. Coupons for cake ingredients and candles prior to a birthday, perhaps? Jane directs her training team to incorporate test and learn opportunities to enable the management team to become comfortable with these new solutions. She also works with marketing leaders to identify the new roles and app development skills required. An adaptive workforce needs adaptive experiences. In an adaptive workforce, employees assume many duties. Associates, for example, act as meal consultants, personal shoppers, and even data scientists. Talent can be shifted among stores as needed to give store managers greater flexibility to meet demand while optimizing costs. Jane works with HR managers to create experiences employees want. A new artificial intelligence-enabled, multi-channel scheduling platform allows workers to request the days and hours they want to work in their preferred location. Workers who choose high-traffic stores and/or high-volume hours are offered additional benefits. By giving associates a greater say in when and where they work, job satisfaction and employee productivity soar. Managing peak demand. A few months later, GoGrow races for the rush of holiday shoppers. During peak selling periods, it has been difficult for HR managers to staff stores adequately. That's no longer the case. The new workforce management platform, powered by big data analysis, makes it easy for Jane's store managers to manage the adaptive workforce dynamically. It Uberizes the associate's experience, enabling managers to draw talent from other stores or even outside the company. It enables HR to automatically plan and schedule employee coverage for each store, aligned to employee preferences. Further, the system automatically confirms schedules with associates and even tracks attendance. Store managers that still have difficulty with staffing can virtually interact with Jane to get permission to boost incentives. Exceeding customer experience and employee experience expectations. 3 months later, GoGrow leaders meet virtually to review results. They acknowledge Jane's role in the strategy's success, particularly her willingness to invest in new technologies. Those investments paid off. YoY same-store sales have climbed 4.5%. Workforce performance is up 23%. Job satisfaction scores have risen 12% thanks to the augmenting technologies, flexible hours, and an employee experience that is aligned to the needs of the associates. And HR costs remain stable despite expanding the adaptive associate workforce by 5%. Jane reflects on how far she has come since her days as a GoGrow clerk. She is no longer ringing up sales, but she is definitely bringing in profits. Unleash the power of digital technologies and reinvent your workforces with Accenture.
Sorry, ignore the last few seconds. We did not want to bring Accenture into this, but I hope the concept has been clear in terms of how all the 5 things that I talked about comes together in terms of giving the best experience, because an organization survives and is successful only when they deliver great experience for their end customers and their internal customers, that is their employees, vendors, etc., etc. So in other words, we exist for business to give the best experience to our customers, whether internal or external. And if we are able to give that best experience, we are successful in whatever we are doing. And that's exactly where you fit in, because all of you will fit into any of these pillars as a starting point in your career. In whatever you do, it ultimately contributes to the larger success of the organization. And that is why we want you all to broaden your thinking and see how you can contribute to the success of your end customer. That's what you need to always have in mind. So with that, let's move on, Aishwarya. So this is what Elon Musk had to say about creating a company. In other words, some of you will grow to be entrepreneurs who will create new companies. Some of you will make another company successful by working successfully in that company. And these are the 5 rules that you should keep in mind to be successful.
I think the first is, depending on how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night. 7 days a week, all the time. Work hard like every waking hour. That's the thing I would say particularly if you're starting a company. And I mean, if you do simple math, say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company.
I think too is you got to make sure that whatever you're doing is a great product or service. It has to be really great. And I go back to what I was saying earlier, where if you're a new company, I mean, unless it's like some new industry or new market that, if it's an untapped market, then you have more ability to, the standard is lower for your product or service. But if you're entering anything where there's an existing marketplace against large entrenched competitors, then your product or service needs to be much better than theirs. It can't be a little bit better, because then you put yourself in the shoes of the consumer and they say, why would you buy it as a consumer? You're always going to buy the trusted brand unless there's a big difference. So a lot of times an entrepreneur will come up with something which is only slightly better. And it can't just be slightly better. It's got to be a lot better.
The other thing I'd say is that if you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing, that you really respect, or if you're building a company, you've got to gather great people. I mean, all a company is a group of people that are gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they're focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. So do everything you can to gather great people if you're creating a company. Then I'd say focus on signal over noise. A lot of companies get confused. They spend money on things that don't actually make the product better. So, for example, at Tesla, we've never spent any money on advertising. We put all of the money into R&D and manufacturing and design to try to make the car as good as possible. And I think that's the way to go. So for any given company, just keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are expending, are they resulting in a better product or service? And if they're not, stop those efforts. And then I think that the final thing I would encourage you to do is, now is the time to take risk. You don't have, yeah, you don't have kids, but as you get older, your obligations increase. And once you have a family, you start taking risks not just for yourself, but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it.
Okay. The 5 important advice that you see from Elon in terms of what it takes to become successful, and very rightly said, put a lot of hard work, put all your efforts in creating a very, very differentiated product, way better than your competitors. Either a product or a service, it has to stand out much better than your competitor. Otherwise, it's not going to survive. And your action speaks for yourself. As I said, you are your own sales agent. And that's exactly what Ellen also said, that your products will sell by itself. If you make your product so great, you don't even need an advertisement budget. And last, taking risk is an important part. You have to take risk because taking a risk will pay off. If certain risks don't pay off, it will be a learning. And that is a great treasure that you will use for your next venture. And this is what is about how you kind of fit in. So tell me, does it resonate with you? Questions, queries, criticism, all welcome. No question, Karan?
No, sir. I just would like to say one thing. There was that slide in the middle there, which carried a Peter Drucker quote. The most effective way to manage change is to create it, or something like that.
It said the best way to predict the future is to create this.
All right, all right.
So basically, yeah, go ahead.
On a very deep level, because it's as true for businesses as it is for life. I mean, it goes beyond businesses. Like, as you're living your life, you should go by that philosophy. So
absolutely. And I mean, you live it from morning to night, whether you are working in the morning for your company or in the evening you're working for a family. You need to think about what you want to be in the future, how a good person you want to be, how useful you want to be for the society, how useful you want to be to your loved ones. And that is how you kind of resolve for yourself in terms of what you need to do to make that happen. And that's perfectly true and very well pointed out, Karan. Cool. So next, let's move on again. And as we said, the next section is about role of technology in the future. I will not spend too much time on it because you had seen it quite evident that technology plays a key role in enabling and making all the strategy, organization, talent, etc. happen. So let's move on to the next slide, Aishwarya. So technology is definitely an enabler, and I will probably let you all watch this video because it is kind of a summarization of what we said in terms of how technology or the future is going to pan out and how technology is going to enable all of these things. And as you can see, technology is in everything. Okay, be it the book you read, the physical book you read, or the Kindle that you read on the either your phone or your laptop. Okay, so technology is ever present. We cannot deny technology. You cannot challenge technology. It's better to be friends with technology, because that's how you will be able to harness technology in whatever you are doing. All right, so next slide please, Aishwarya. So ultimately we will move on to basically the final section in terms of having seen all these things, what is that opportunity that we have for all of us. So Aishwarya, next slide. Yeah, so as you can see here, I didn't put up anything in that slide. Can you tell me why? Any guesses?
It's our job to find out. It's our job to read the future and see the opportunities in it, and then fill the slide with our ideas.
Correct. So for us, the opportunity is like a white canvas. What picture you want to draw in that white canvas, and therefore what you see as the summarization of this slide is what will come in the next click. Aishwarya, so just one simple word, infinite, because for you opportunity is infinite, because everything that you have seen till now, you are an integral part of everything that you have seen so far. It's for you to realize what have you been brought into this world for and achieve it. And that's why I say opportunities are infinite for all of us. And you at the very starting point of your career, it's probably the right starting point to think big, think bold, and take the right steps towards your future. So Aishwarya, go to the next slide, please. So finally, I will summarize my entire slideware pack that I had. Is that the picture that you see on this, you are a part of every dot that makes up this picture in some form or the other. Your career is going to shape in such a way that you will contribute in one of these elements that you see in this picture. But what is the key thing that you will bring to the table when you are part of this is about innovation, thinking big, thinking bold, thinking differently, and creating products and services of the future, which is innovative. And that's what will make you succeed. That's what will make your organization, wherever you work, succeed. And with that, I will end my presentation here. And a big thank you for listening in. And the last thing that I wanted to leave you, just go back to the previous slide. This is one summarization of what you see in the industry today. Hanuma talked about consumer goods industry. And what you see on this screen is the number of innovators who have disrupted this industry today. And they all are working on specific experiences for their consumers. Some are talking about what consumers want. Some are talking about how the consumer wants and when the consumer wants. And as you can see, each of these blocks have a theme there. Again, in terms of what differentiated products and services they are bringing in order to challenge the biggies that are existing in this industry. So there will be always a challenge from such disruptors, and the role of innovation will not die away. In fact, it will grow multifold, and there will always be a challenge to the survival of any existing organization on this planet. So with that, I will end this. Thank you very much. So I will kind of open up the forum for questions. If any, feel free to ask questions and I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, so I think this was a very sort of inspiring and a very comprehensive session. If I remember correctly, I think we started out by looking at the challenges in the near future. Then there was this really interesting video that presented the world of 2050, and the technologies that will define the future 2050. We learned about the pandemic's impact on the consumer goods industry, which was presented, of course, by Hanuma ma'am. And we learned about how things have changed there. And then we also learned about Accenture's vision of a future-ready organization, the 5 points. Again, one thing that stood out there was the first one about being proactive instead of reactive, which is in line with the Peter Drucker quote there as well. And then, there were a lot of amazing videos. And the last slide was also very interesting, where we got to learn about some companies that are, creating the future of humanity in many ways. I'm familiar with some of them. I think I've tried Soylent drink as well. I tried it once, and it was a very fascinating presentation overall. I have a lot of questions, but before I absolutely, sir, I will be asking them. But before I ask you the questions, I'd just like to make a quick announcement to the audience. So the floor is open for questions, like Sir said. What you have to do is to send your questions via chat to me. That would be Karan Gupta, JLU. You'll be able to find that in the chat. And then I'll be able to relay them to Sir, and I'll try my best to get your questions answered as well, in addition to mine. So, Sir, for you, I have a few questions that just came up to me. So, you started working at Accenture, if I remember correctly, in the March of 2019, right?
Absolutely.
So this is a very interesting combination of month and year, because this was exactly a year before the pandemic struck India. So you spent an year as the MD pre-pandemic, and then you have spent like close to 2 hours as the MD during the pandemic as well. So I wanted you to elaborate on how the pandemic impacted Accenture internally. Like Accenture's internal systems and processes, your ways of working, and how the pandemic disrupted them. Then how sort of Accenture managed the change, and how they were able to get their feedback up and begin resumed working despite the pandemic. So could you please elaborate a little bit on that internal sort of impact on Accenture?
Very good question. In fact, that will tell us how, in fact, Accenture itself is changing with the reality of pandemic. For example, when I joined Accenture, my job is always client facing. So that means as a managing director, I'm supposed to be meeting clients every day. So I used to be traveling almost 3 weeks a month. I will probably get only a week at home. The rest of the weeks, I'll be either at different delivery locations or at client locations. And I would be basically flying from one end of the world to the other end of the world, either to convince my clients to buy new stuff or work with the clients in terms of how they want to kind of transform. So with pandemic, absolute travel freeze. So we don't even travel for 1 day in a month today. But yet, have you stopped interacting with our clients? No, because we have kind of brought the physical world to the virtual world and have made all efforts as possible. For example, if I have to do a transformation and project for a client, that means I have to be present in day-long workshops with a client in terms of doing a design thinking, because we don't want to enforce decisions. We want decisions to evolve. Okay, and the process of evolution, we do it through the design thinking process. And earlier we used to do it physically at client's premise. Now we do it over virtually using tools like Mural. Okay, which kind of brings in the same effect, but obviously you are not physically with the client. Then the client is to visit us multiple times a year. And we had big investment in terms of showing client the art of the possible, the innovations that we do, all those physical investments that we did, that still exist. But what we had to do is that quickly change that mode to a virtual, so that we kind of transferred all those assets into the virtual world using virtual reality, augmented reality. So the client now even today also feels the same effect, or the experience of the client is same as what he or she would get if they walked into an Accenture premise today. Are people who joined Accenture prior to the pandemic, they were used to a great environment of work. The Accenture's work environment is something that is to be seen. Okay, the elaborate investment in terms of workplace facility, the way you collaborate, the way you have kind of an open space without any boundaries. Say, for example, well, as a managing director, you would expect me to be holed up in a cabin or so. We have an open culture out here. Okay, so that means anybody can walk into a managing director's place and have that questions addressed then and there. You don't have to think about levels. You don't have to think about taking an appointment. So how could we make that experience available to employees who joined post-pandemic, who did not even had an experience of the Accenture premise? So we tried our efforts in order to be visible, and we made it kind of mandatory for all of us who are part of the leadership to be always on video as much as possible, so that you are seen as if you are face to face. Okay, and that made a lot of effort. It didn't come in one day. Obviously, it has to come with certain steps and certain gradual changes. But yes, we are also changing. Ultimately, our job is also to give the greatest experience for our own employees and our own clients. And that's what we are doing. So pandemic has taught us that, and we feel that this is the way it's going to be in the future also. And there's a great learning out of this.
That was very, very insightful. So we have an audience question already. We have a question from Sashank. And Sashank wants to know, the world is changing visibly, and so are the problems and the opportunities. It's a very dynamic world, way more dynamic than it used to be before. So what skills do you see as important? What skills do you see as valuable in this changing world, so that we as individuals can add value to the industry and to the society?
Very good question. And I'm going to also, after answering the question, I'm going to call upon one of my team members who had been helping us out with the presentation and as well to relate her experience, because she has been 3 years into her career. She has joined us from campus, and we'll let her tell in terms of what it means. But let me start with what I feel in terms of what is the skill requirement that we need to do. So technology is changing so rapidly. Okay. In my days, when I did my MBA, I would be happy if I knew my C programming and SPSS. That was a statistical package that we used to use for all our statistical analysis. If we knew that, that would be good enough for our time to get into the career that we were preparing ourselves for. But today, someone has to be an expert in not just your Microsoft Office, your PowerPoint, plus you need to know something about how to program, how to kind of do data crunching, how to analyze big data. Okay. So the space in which the technology is changing is also driving what skills that we need. For example, in our times when we started my career, we never had smartphones. We had feature phones, right? So it's like basically you slowly adopting the technology of smartphone in your daily life. We have to adopt technology and the related skills. For example, today we talk about full stack engineers. Okay, what does it really mean? It means basically somebody who sees from the requirement to the through all the stages till delivery, so they're able to kind of traverse the end-to-end path for that requirement. Earlier, you used to depend on very specialized skill. Okay, this guy is a Python developer. This is a C++ developer. This guy is a Fortran developer. Okay, the era of specialization is slowly fading into you have to be jack of all trades, but mind you, the next part of it, master of something. Okay, the proverb said, jack of all trades, master of nothing. That is not true anymore. You got to be jack of all trades, but master of something, because that's where your specialization, that's where your differentiation in the eyes of your customers, internal and external, would matter. And therefore, you need to adapt with times. You need to adapt to work in an agile way so that you see the end-to-end picture and you're able to contribute into that end-to-end picture. And be it technical skills, be it domain skills, I'll leave it to you, because you are the best judge of where your sweet spots are in terms of our abilities, capabilities, and interest. But make sure you enlarge that enough so that you are ready for the future. So does that answer your question, Shashank?
Okay, I got a chat from I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did. We need to move on. There are a couple more audience questions here.
So before you go there, let's call Aishwarya to narrate her experience, how she has grown in her last couple of years in terms of her experience, her job role, and satisfaction. So Aishwarya, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Abhijit, and thank you, JLU, for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this session. So, basically, I've been a part of Accenture, and basically, this is my first company for the last 3 years. And even so, even after being part of this organization, I'm still learning, and I've still learned so much today in just the 2 hours that we had this session. I work with Abhijit on a day-to-day basis, and I've still learned so much more from him through this session. So one thing that I would definitely encourage throughout and across your entire career is to find that learning spot and to keep learning, have that constant learning curve, definitely. Just to give you a little bit of background, so I'm a chemical engineer and I've done my MBA in marketing. I work for a IT consulting company under consumer goods as an industry. So when you talk about, or when the question in terms of what are the skills that you really need to develop and and start learning, it's everything and beyond that as well. So it's about what is important today. When the pandemic struck, we had to immediately, almost overnight, come up with at least ways and ideas to change the way we were working, to change the way we were delivering to our clients, to not to be able to really rise up to the occasion of, or not to the occasion actually, but to the challenges that we were facing at that point in time, and come up with relevant ways to serve our clients. So what was probably, like how Abhijit mentioned, what was in his time was the most relevant thing keeps changing, and with that should our learning and should our skills keep adapting and evolving. So for example, based beyond this pandemic, and even so has accelerated a lot of things and a lot of trends and the way we are working today. So one of the things that comes up for a lot of companies today is in terms of the focus on sustainability. That's not just from a client perspective, but even from a global perspective, from a UN perspective, and all of that. So today, that focus is changing, and that's going to keep happening. So I would just like to really point out, or everything that Abhijit said is exactly how it should be, like jack of all trades and master of something. So that's how we should be dealing with skills and our career growth and changes. So yeah, I will not take more time. I'm sure there's a lot of questions that Abhijit will need to answer. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that was
Thank
very
you.
well, Ashwarya, ma'am. And I'm sure skills are often transferable as well. Even though you studied chemical engineering and your present job probably has nothing to do at all with chemical engineering, but a lot of what you learn there, in a lot of the way your mind developed in terms of problem solving, in terms of how you see the world, probably comes in very handy. So skills are often transferable. You master one thing, and you find that you have developed skills in 20 other areas as well, which are sort of linked in an abstract manner, but not necessarily in a concrete manner. That was very, very interesting.
That's very true.
Yeah. I have another question here. This is from Sakshi. This question is for Sir, for Abhijit Dutta, sir. So Sakshi, sir, is a BCom graduate. She's doing her MBA. She's in the first year, and she has doubts about the utility of an MBA. She's of the opinion that she should just go and join the workforce and then just learn things that way. She's interested in HR, and she thinks that she doesn't need an MBA. She should just go and join an HR position, and she'll learn that way. So yeah, her question is really about the relevance of MBA. So this is a very interesting one. So,
all right.
So,
very good question. I think that's a very, very valid question, and if you ask me honestly, some people learn on the job, some people learn from textbook, and then they apply on the job. Okay, it's about how your strengths and abilities come together, because every human being is different, their mental construct is different, their ability to kind of set themselves into a situation is different, and when you say MBA is not required, I'll probably say that maybe even in a substitute, if you have an MBA or you go through the courses that gives you that vision, or that broadens your vision about certain things. For example, when I did my MBA, I always thought whether organizational behavior is a subject that needs to be learned. Okay, because my professor who used to teach me organization behavior used to jokingly say, in the organization behavior, you ultimately become a sadharan manager or a general manager. That's how he kind of made it very kind of fun about that study. But things strike, because those are the things that you carry in your mind. Oh, my professor made a fun about. I still remember during my physics class, my physics sir said, while teaching radioactivity, he said, milk se silk banta hai. Very noble. I mean, from a question of making it light, it's fantastic way to put things into perspective, that you're making an atomic change from one element to the other through radioactive process, right? So these are things that you basically carry in your mind when you study. And I'll say honestly, even if you're able to implement 10% of what you learned during your engineering or your MBA or your BCom, MCom days, you should consider yourself successful in life. The question is, you should have the grit and the ability to think and implement those in real life, because at the end of the day, what matters is what your gut feels. Okay, many situations in business, we take decision based on certain gut feels, and that gut feel comes out of experience, and nothing beats experience. No matter how much of an MBA degree and you all carry, ultimate test is about experience. And whenever I recruit people, I ensure that I don't ask them any theoretical questions. I always put them on a spot by telling them an incident and giving them a case and ask them how they would go about solving that situation. It could be a situation right at home. It could be a situation just outside right, in the market, or it could be a situation in business. So it's about problem solving approach that we need our abilities to be honed, and that's where what would make you successful. I am not where I am today just because I had done my engineering from NIT Bhopal or done my PGDIM from NITI. It's because the experience, the cumulative experience that I have brought to the table, which helps me in making my decisions every day. And that is what you need to build on. Experience is the biggest asset.
That is very well put. You also mentioned that you're a huge fan of Star Trek, and I'm sure that also is an experience that shaped you as a person, and somewhere in your mind that also sort of allowed you to do some of the great things that you've done.
In fact, I would like to add on, failures are the biggest learning experience, because with one failure, you know why did that thing did not succeed. And if you are able to take that learning and put it into a next scenario, you would not fail. So take every moment as a learning. And again, I go back to my UB40 song, which says, every day I'm learning more. The more I learn, the less I know than before.
Everything you know, everything you learn leads to 10 more questions. So it's
Absolutely.
an exponential thing, exponential graph. Anyway, so this has been a great session so far. And I would like to thank Mr. Dutta and his team for coming here today, sharing with us all of these new ideas. It was a very inspiring session as well. Ms. Aishwarya ma'am talked about her career as well. Everyone shared their insights. I have personally about like 20 to 30 more questions to ask, but unfortunately, we are short of time. We've run out of time. So we'll have to call this session to an end. That's it, So the Omicron variant is spreading very quickly. So I hope everyone is taking all of the necessary precautions here. And, I hope everyone remains happy and healthy and productive and does great things. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much on behalf of all of us, and stay safe and be successful in wherever you are, whatever you are doing. So find your North Stars in life. That's what I'll say.
Absolutely, sir.